So I just want to say the purpose of our adult forums this winter, spring, is to bring parishioners who have a passion around a particular subject. And Marijane has a real passion on health and how, and it's not specifically dieting, but she's going to talk to us about obesity today and how medical dieting can really help improve all kinds of parts of someone's life. And so I look forward. Like I said, I got to view this PowerPoint earlier this week, and I'm really excited to sit and listen to this and hear her comments on it. But I do want to say is that Marijane started the weight loss clinic in 2009, which I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit about, which is now staffed by 5 physicians, including a mindfulness coach, a dietitian, and a psychiatrist, as well as medical students and interns. And so we look forward, Marijane, to hearing your thoughts, and thank you. Come on up.
Can you all hear me? Okay. I'm from New York, so I usually don't need a microphone when I speak. So anyhow, so I have been interested in obesity in years, because before I was a physician, I was a nurse. And I used to see a lot of the people that were prematurely in intensive care, because that's the kind of nurse I was, were people that smoked too much when we used to smoke, and were people that ate too much. So people in their 60s, much earlier than they should be. So I went to medical school on the encouragement of a lot of the doctors I worked with, and I was determined to try to prevent some of the things that we have issues with. So let's just talk a little bit about obesity. So more than 72 million Americans are obese. I mean, we don't need to know that. And people that are obese have higher medical costs, and the more you weigh, the higher the medical costs be. It's really a BMI over 35. We'll talk about what BMI is that can get people in the most trouble. And people that have obesity have more weight around their waist. And the more severe the obesity, the more it costs. And no state has an obesity rate less than 15%. Now, for years, Colorado was holding out, but now Colorado is equally as obese. So these are the states of obesity in the latest data from the CDC. And the most obese states are the dark red. This isn't a political thing here. And West Virginia, Alabama, Arkansas, and so the darkest red states have obesity rates over 35%, which is really high. And it also has to do with the Southern diet, which has lots of grits and fried food. So we call that the obesity belt, which extends from West Virginia to Texas. So the lighter green states are the ones that really have a lot less obesity. And it really, if you notice too, they're also the wealthier states. So obesity is a disease of poverty around the world. And interestingly, the Affordable Care Act, these are the states that adopted it are in the blue, and the ones that aren't are in the red, and they've in the purple on the right hand. And we have already seen in early data coming out of Michigan, there's an improvement in obesity, asthma, hypertension from the Affordable Care Act because it allows us to treat obesity. The other issue that we didn't think, we always thought asthma in terms of medicine was because of the extra weight from the breasts or the extra weight on people's chests, and that's why people with obesity was a risk factor for asthma. But what we found is actually that healthy eating improves asthma because the vegetables that people eat when they're trying to lose weight or eating in a healthier way actually decreases the inflammation and improves asthma from an inflammatory standpoint. So for all sorts of reasons, we need to be eating better. I'm going to give a case study because this is what we do when we teach in the medical school. So this is a patient I've been working with for a really long time, just to give you an idea of the complexity of the patients that we work with. And not all our patients, some patients we have just need to lose 30 pounds. But this is a 44-year-old African-American female, and she's 462 pounds, and she's 5'7". And the reason she came to see me is she couldn't walk, and she wanted to start getting a walker. And she has osteoarthritis of her knees, and she has chronic pain in her back, and she was using a cane to ambulate, and she needed a walker. Now, the social history on some of these obese patients is just amazing. So she was sexually abused as a child, and she had 2 children with special needs that she had to get up and toilet every night. and she slept poorly and ate. And a lot of people that have special needs are taking care of patients or parents with Alzheimer's eat a lot, because what do you do during the day? You watch TV and you eat, because you can't really do that much when you're taking care of someone who's chronically ill. So a lot of my patients actually are caretakers, okay? And she didn't have any money, and she had food insecurity, no alcohol and drugs, and her marriage wasn't so great. So it sounds terrible, but these are the type of patients we see. They're not all the type of patients, but what are the risk factors for obesity? So the most obese group we have are African American women, and it's women with less education and money. And adolescents that go to college that are obese are less likely to finish college than the normal weight counterparts. So it's not just obesity as a medical condition, it actually affects your life, and it affects women. Men don't have the same thing. Women don't get promoted that are obese, and women often don't move up in their jobs, and they actually make less money. So it's a social issue as well. Medications can cause obesity, mostly the psychotropic drugs, but also antihistamines can increase your weight by making you hungry, as well as medicines for seizure disorders. So there's lots of reasons people get obese. Disordered sleep, so you have to sleep between 7 and 8 hours to make healthy food choices. So in our society now, we have so many people that sleep less than 6 hours, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Stress and mental illness. ADHD is a risk factor for obesity and schizophrenia, because these people, carbohydrates tend to raise your serotonin, which makes you feel better. So a lot of people with depression tend to eat more because it makes them feel better. Eating out in sugary beverages, this is like huge in our society right now. That's one of the first things we do is find out, do they drink soda, do they drink juice? And we'll talk about that a little bit. And people are under this misguided impression that restaurants are healthier than fast foods, and in studies that is no difference. And I've had a lot of patients, and if anyone complains about food at a nice restaurant, they just add butter, sugar, or salt, and then people stop complaining. So it's, and years ago they used to put little hearts next to menu options to get people to eat healthier, but the chefs told me they actually had to stop that, because that was a definite, they had to throw out all that food, because people do not want to go out to eat and have really a healthy meal. Yeah.
At what point, what's the definition for you need to lose a few pounds and then you transition to your obese?
Well, we'll talk about that. We'll get into all that. And sedentary lifestyle. So I try to have my patients get up every hour. So it's not really, when you're losing weight, it's all that goes in your mouth. It's not as much about exercise, but if you don't move the entire day, and with the computers, a lot of people really don't move much. I have them get up at least 5 minutes in every single hour. This is, we were featured at GW Clinic in the Atlantic because we work with people of childhood sexual assault. So the average BMI, and I'll talk about what a BMI is, of people that are obese is over half of them are over 35. So whether it's to shield them from having relationships, they're not sure, but people, we always screen for sexual abuse or really any type of terrible childhood trauma, because these people often tend to be obese, and these people have to go see psychiatrists and have to sit and and get a lot of counseling. Doesn't matter how much we talk to them about what to eat. If you really have terrible childhood trauma or you were sexually abused, you have to get psychiatric help, and that's where our psychiatrists come in. So what is a BMI? A BMI over 30 means you're obese. So what would that be? That would be like someone who's 5'4" and over 170 pounds. So it's, and some people say, well, what if I'm super fit? If you're super fit, your abdomen would be flat. So waist circumference is also important when you consider cardiac and disease risks. So waist circumference is now emerging in the literature as probably one of the most important things, is to have a waist that isn't big. And things that make your waist bigger are things like corn syrup that's found in soda. Vegetarians tend to gain weight around their hips. So if you're heavy but all your weight is around your hips and not around your waist, you usually don't get diabetes, renal failure, or cancer. So all of this waist fat is emerging now as a risk for sleep apnea and all these other things, terrible diseases, but it's mostly people that have big waist. And also Asians are obese at a much lower rate, Southeast Asians and South Americans, than Americans. So we tend to worry more about them, and they also tend to gain weight around their waist. So the waist circumference is really emerging as a problem and if you increase your fiber, your waist will actually get smaller. So something like every 10 grams of fiber you increase per day decreases your waist by 4%. So it's all about eating a lot of vegetables, really. That's what I say a lot of the day. So prevention is key. The body wants to return to its heaviest weight naturally, and we're not sure why that is. So why the body wants to always gain the weight that you've lost has not been worked out with science. And about a third of our food choices are made at end-of-aisle locations. So the marketers know exactly what they're doing, putting the sugared cereals right up at the end of the aisle. And you probably remember when Bloomberg tried to regulate, all he tried to do was have soda be 24 ounces at places like 7-Eleven, and people said that was part of their civil liberties to buy whatever they wanted. But I saw a commissioner, the New York Health Commissioner, at one of my obesity conferences, and they said it was fantastic that happened because it got people talking about it. Because before that, people weren't even talking about it. So anytime you can, even if you don't change legislation, if you can raise people's consciousness to a high level, it's very important. But there are very few regulations on marketing of foods or commercials with kids. So the worst sodas you can have are orange sodas or citrus sodas. Those are the ones that have the most sugar. So if you look at the current label, which is on the left, you'll see that you're supposed to take this bottle of soda, which has 20 ounces in it, okay, and share it with 2.5 people. Do you see that? So how they show the nutrition facts label is based on 8 ounces. But people think that's the whole deal, right? They think that it's 110 calories. But the true calories is on the right side. That would be 275. And they don't tell you the teaspoons of sugar, which is how Americans think. They just do it in grams, and physicians don't even know what this is. I have to teach all the new doctors all this. So you take the 30 grams of sugar and divide by 4 to get the number of teaspoons. So if you'll notice, all the other food values have a percentage, but the sugar doesn't, and that's because our sugar lobby is so strong and has kept the percentages of sugar out of the food label. Now, if you read, I know this because you get all the dirt when you take care of people that work for the government. But if you look at what the sugar lobby says, they say it's because this is added sugars and they don't know how to do it, but they do know how to. Sugar is sugar. I mean, if you look at all the studies. So they should be, if they had a real label, when you're drinking that bottle of soda, it would say calories are 275, and that's 300% of your daily need of sugar. That's way too much. So as Americans, we're supposed to have, not Americans, but if you're a woman, you're supposed to have no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar, and if you're a man, you're supposed to have 9 teaspoons. Now, this isn't fruits and vegetables because they have sugar. It's not the same way. This is added sugar, so this is anything with a label. But you say if you drank 2 of these, half. I have patients that are poor. Soda's the only food that has gone down in price since the 60s. They'd eat half a liter of soda a day. You're talking about, maybe 100 teaspoons of sugar, right? So it's just a lot. So how do we treat obesity in our clinic? So at the hallmark of any good obesity program is diet, exercise, and behavior change. So we really work with our patients. For example, if every day they get a Dunkin' Donut on their way to work, we try to tell them to walk a different way to work, or we try to figure out all these different ways that they can start changing their habits. We try to get their families involved as well. So that usually can get 10% of people's weight off. Meds, we have 4 meds now that really are helpful to help people lose weight, and that can get off another 10 to 15. And then surgery, if in extreme cases, we will send patients to surgery, and that will get off 25. But interestingly, if you look at patients' dream weight, so that's 45%, they always want to be at 50%. So everyone kind of wants to weigh what they were when they were like age 10. And no one 300 ever wants to be 280. So even when we work to get someone from 300 to 250, they're never happy. you know. And I have a patient I worked with for 2 years. He went from 250 to 200, and he goes, oh, Dr. Hynes, I just want to be 190. You know, so people are never, it's like Jackie Kennedy said, you can't be too rich or too thin. But we really have to set up reality for our patients because they really want to lose. Like what they think they can lose is never what we can achieve with them. So this is our clinic. So we have a patient, we try to put the patient at the center of everything versus us telling them what to do because they have to do it themselves. So we put the patient at the center. We have a wonderful dietitian that teaches community cooking classes that gets them out. We have our social worker that works with them, and that's really important because sometimes these patients need food stamps or they need to know where the food banks are in the area if they don't have money. We send everybody to physical therapy that needs it. A lot of people, for example, have had a stroke 10 years ago, haven't been in physical therapy in 10 years, you know, so we will send them to physical therapy. We have a stress reducer. Interestingly, we used to think depression was like a root, but a lot of these people do not need psychiatric care, they just need help with stress. You know, so if we have a doctor that's really into mindful eating and stress reduction, and she has really helped a lot of our patients just by having them eat more mindfully. So she uses some Buddhist techniques with some patients do not like, but she does a lot of interesting things with patients to try to get them to eat slower, to use smaller utensils, to savor what they eat. And we have a saying, you should be a food snob. If you're not really enjoying it, don't keep eating it. So what are the components of a healthy lifestyle? It's adequate sleep, diet, and exercise, not 2 out of 3, which a lot of Washingtonians are trying to get away with, particularly women. And women really have gained weight and they sleep with their kids and they sleep with their dogs, and we really try to work with them to sleep better. Sleep is really, really important, and why they're not exercising as well, and why we. Self-monitoring in terms of weight loss is key. There are little apps, and all poor people have phones, smartphones. And so there's an app called MyFitnessPal, which is really helpful for weight loss. And you can add up your calories on MyFitnessPal, and we teach our patients how to do that. And daily weighing seems to work better than weekly or monthly. Exercise, just moving, we try to get people moving first. But the more self-monitoring, meaning MyFitnessPal, the more weight loss. And it teaches you how to eat. Because what happens with MyFitnessPal is they have everything in it. You can't believe it. Like if you go to Arby's, they have the Arby's sandwiches. But when patients decide they're going to get a chicken quesadilla as an appetizer and they look it up and find out it's 1,200 calories, they really do think, well, maybe I shouldn't get that as an appetizer, or maybe this isn't a good idea. So I think the self-monitoring works because it teaches people really what's in their food. Like people think Chipotle is healthy, but there's burritos there that are 2,000 to 2,500 calories. So there's a book, if you're interested in any of this, called Food Rules by Michael Pollan. He's a food writer for the New York Times, and it only takes about an hour to eat. But this is kind of what I say a lot of the day, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And that kind of is a lot of all of this. If you look at studies on people, a lot of the studies on food are done at Adventists, because Adventists are vegetarians on the whole, so they have a lot of good studies. The problem with food studies is people that are vegans are usually not smokers and exercise, and their BMI average is 22, whereas I said normal weight is up to 25, and then 30 starts obesity. So they usually don't smoke either. So it's hard to look at this, you know, in a full way. But if you look at just who lives the longest, it's pescatarians. So those are people that eat fish and tons of vegetables, okay? And then second after that are vegans and then vegetarians. And the people that don't live the longest are red meat eaters. So we know this now. And it may be just due to the processing. And so what do we do with our patients? We have our patients full half the plate with vegetables, that's one. Then quarter of the plate with protein, and then the third of the plate with the carbohydrate, and you eat the vegetables first. So if you can eat your vegetables first, you're going to do better. Because the idea is to fill up on vegetables, because that's going to make you healthier. So we try to get our patients to get used to eating vegetables, and we have, you know, food banks, if the patients are poor, to go to. we really know what we're doing in terms of trying to get people so they don't suffer from food insecurity. So the basic, it doesn't really matter what diet you're on. I always get these questions when I give talks, like, which is the best? There is no best diet. It's the one your patient will stay on. So if my patient wants to be a vegan, I'm fine. I can work with them with it. It's whatever it is, but it's basically mostly vegetables. The people that lose the most weight usually don't give up a food group. Like, you know, people say, I'm not doing any carbohydrates. Well, carbohydrates are in vegetables. You know, they don't, you know, but whatever group, if they want to do Whole30, which is the latest fad, I say fine. But I try to get them to eat less. And mindfulness training is really helpful. I mean, mindfulness is big now, and it really does work to get people just slowing down, savoring the food, eating at a table. You cannot eat at a computer or at a TV because the brain doesn't know when you're full, right? So we have to get patients to be eating at tables again. Fiber is incredibly important. There's a lot in the microbiome, a lot of that literature. It hasn't really been worked out scientifically, but we know that vegetables keep the gut healthy and it fills you up. So you want to eat a lot of vegetables. Most Americans eat 15 grams a day of fiber, and the recommendations are 25 for women and 38 for men. So that we just do not eat enough vegetables and fruits too. So how can you get more fiber in your diet? Beans are the superstars. So 1 cup of black beans has 15 grams of protein and 5 grams of fiber. So I just tell my patients, just twice a week, have a cup of beans somewhere. Just put beans no matter where you can put them. Oats are actually better than bran in terms of fiber. Brussels sprouts and sweet potatoes have a lot, are really good food. And it's interesting because sweet potato was the #1 crop in the United States until the 50s. People ate it a lot before fast food to satisfy that sweet flavor. And now, you know, once fast food and McDonald's opened, the sweet potato crops went way down, but they're having a resurgence again. But that's a really good way to get fiber plus satisfy that sweet tooth that people have from a natural way. Oranges are good, and flax seeds. So we try every time the patient comes in, we see them once a month, can we try this? And a lot of patients, you know, are willing, once they start losing weight, they feel so much better that that's what spurs them on. So we just got to get that first 10 pounds off, because each pound is seen by the knees is 5 pounds when you're going down the stairs. So if you get off 10 pounds, you are actually carrying 50 pounds less weight.
You said eating before appetite with the skin. You recommend?
Oh yeah, so anything with the skin is better than. So the idea of whole foods is that you eat whatever it is whole, right? That's what whole foods means, you know, in general. So we try to promote whole foods. Now, people don't go from McDonald's to this overnight, so you can see how we have to work with these patients a really long time to get them from a really bad diet to a really good one. It usually takes about a year. I'm reiterating, but fruits, nuts, vegetable oils, fish, whole grains, and beans are of benefit. In the middle, we don't really know dairy. Dairy seems kind of neutral. It seems, I just got a paper published that looked at dairy as a prevention of sleep apnea. So it seems like dairy, for example, and this is, you know, has to do in a larger scale study, but seems it helps prevent gout. In people, when they have dairy, they present with less gout, or when they have sleep apnea, they present with less sleep apnea. So dairy has some kind of healthy role. We just don't know what it is. And it seems like it's not intuitive, like whole milk seems healthier, maybe because it's less processed than reduced fat. So we don't really know, but we do know that, and we don't know about unprocessed red meats. Although there's a recent study out of France that women that ate 6 ounces of meat, so that would be 2 palms of the hand, had more breast cancer than people that don't. That's kind of a lot of meat though for women, you know, 2 palms a day. And then the foods that we know are harmful are refined grains. So that's when you buy a loaf of bread and you look and it says unbleached flour or enriched. It means they've taken out the whole grain and they've put it in with junk. And we're dyeing white bread brown now, believe it or not. So you really have to make sure that the first word on the ingredients list is whole when you buy your bread.
Mary Jane, I have the microphone, so I can speak into that. Where's pork fit in this?
Pork is red meat.
It's red meat,
Yeah,
even though
sure.
it's white.
Uh-huh.
It's red meat. Gotcha. Okay.
It's considered red meat. But we don't really know of unprocessed because, for example, in some places in South America, they're still doing just mainly grass-fed. And that, that may be okay. We don't really know. There hasn't been a lot of studies. But the processed meats like hamburgers, there's really no question that this is not good for you. Bacon, barbecued, cured, anything along those lines are unhealthy. The less red meat, the better, really. That's pretty much across the board. And you need about 7 hours to make good food choices of sleep. And we really work with them. And women and children seem more sensitive. There was a study they did at UCLA where they took away the kids' devices an hour early in the evenings and gave the kids breakfast. And they actually was associated with less weight gain. So sleeping is really important, particularly for children, and women seem more sensitive to sleep. And people think, well, of course you just make better food choices because you're less tired. That's part of it. But those who sleep less than 5 hours a week eat 500 more calories a day. Now, this has been studied. And this is very, very, very important because poverty is a risk factor for short sleep. So it may be that and African American women are the group that gets the least amount of sleep, and a lot of our women get less sleep. So it may be that obesity is really a sleep issue as well. And because the hormones that make you hungry actually increase if you don't sleep enough. This has been studied. So insulin levels go up, and the hormones that make you feel full, such as ghrelin, are decreased. So it's a physiologic response to not sleeping is to be hungrier. So it's just, and then of course if you get sleep apnea and you add that to the mix where you're not sleeping because of sleep apnea, then you're in, you can gain more weight. So, yeah.
Sorry, so it's not that if you sleep less, you just have more time in the day to eat. You know what I'm saying? Versus because you're sleeping longer, there's less time.
No, it has nothing really.
Okay.
Although people that get up in the middle of the night to eat, those are really difficult patients to help lose weight. In other words, they're used to getting up at 3 a.m. and having these huge things. But in general, if you just don't sleep, there's a physiologic reaction that you're hungrier. And that's we have to work with patients because a lot of people don't realize that. And they're actually looking now at less sleep in terms of breast cancer and prostate cancer. So obesity is a risk factor for breast and colon and a lot of these cancers now, but maybe it's the sleep piece that's huge. Exercise, we just, as I said, it's when you're losing weight, it's all that goes in your mouth. We just have people move 5 minutes an hour and then 15, and then eventually we work on getting them to move. We don't go from no movement to tons of movement because if you get an Achilles tendonitis, for example, then you're not going to move at all. Then we don't want to go back. So we send these people to physical therapy and they get on walking programs. Most of the smartphones will count your steps. They're not great step counters, but they're okay. But once you lose the weight, you got to work out an hour a day. So I have a few patients in my practice. I have tons of patients that have gone from 300 to 250. I don't have a lot. I have like 3 people, and I can tell you their names that have gone from 400 to 200, for example. But those patients, they go to the gym every day for an hour and a half. And if they don't stay on a low regimented, diet of not eating, they gain the weight back. So it's really hard to keep it off. And that's because your basal metabolic rates. So we really work at keeping the home and car free of temptation. I always tell my patients if it's in your home, it's in your belly. So anything you can't handle, you can't bring in your house. So I had a patient who had skinny cows and he had like 8 skinny cows. And then I said, well, then it's kind of a fat cow, isn't it? So, like these little ice creams that are called skinny cows. You just can't have food in the home you can't handle. And even if you're thin, people have those foods. Smaller plates and silverware work, and then the mindfulness piece cannot be understated. Mindfulness coaches can be a big help in weight loss. And then who messes up? It's oftentimes when things happen when they get a lot of stress. So my patients that have lost like 60 pounds, they, break their leg or something, then they'll start eating again, then we get them in right away and start working with it. We have to think of this as a problem that we can help, that professionals can help you with, versus, you'd never tell a diabetic, you don't need any help, right? But we tell obese patients just move from the table. You know, this is what a lot of my poor, 300-pound patients have been told, just diet and exercise, but no one's helping them. So we really try to help them. So what works in terms of care, we're almost done here, getting to the why of obesity. Each person gets there a different way. Some people, like I had a patient this week who was in a car accident, got depressed, and just gained 50 pounds over 2 years. Totally normal, and people that have a lot of issues in a short period of time gain a lot of weight. So usually people can handle, I'm not saying they can handle, but they can handle one issue, like a kid that has issues. But when you combine that with a mother who's sick, and then we always say when there's 3 issues going on, something goes, and oftentimes it's weight, might be sleep, might be something else. So we try to individualize it. If they have chronic pain, we send them to our pain center. If they eat out, we really need, the eating out piece is huge. You're supposed to come in all the time if you look at weight loss studies, but my patients don't have that kind of money, so we just see them once a month. I don't know why this is doing this. There's drugs on the market that will help, and they all work on the brain to have you eat less. Breakfast is really important each day, and protein every meal. There's a protein drink called Premier that helps people lose weight. It has 30 grams of protein. You can get it at Costco, and you substitute a meal for it, and it really does help people lose weight. Prepackaged meals help people lose weight. Yes, it's processed, but it does help people lose weight because it's a behavioral thing where you only eat that one, lean cuisine. Somehow patients only eat one prepackaged meal when if there was a pot of lasagna, they'd go back 3 and 4 times. So, and then once the patients lose weight, we keep working with them. We say, you have to come in every 3 months. We don't just say, okay, you're done. Because really, they're never done, right? When you have a problem, a chronic problem, it's never really healed. What doesn't work, family acting as the food police and getting on patient for cheating. I mean, they're not committing adultery, for God's sakes. And that we really do have to work with the patients. This is really hard to do. It's really hard for me to do it with my son, but it doesn't work. Trying to help patients say I'm a bad person if I eat that dessert. We try not to have any real forbidden foods, like, of course, soda and a lot of juices out, but we try not to say you can't eat that food, that particular food you really like. We really try to accentuate healthy versus thin. We just want to get you healthier. We want you to eat healthier. And we try to emphasize lifestyle and health and not weight and dieting. And in the future, a lot of this is going to be done phone or online. So the online Weight Watchers programs are associated with 2/3 the weight loss of face-to-face, which is actually pretty good. These are just things patients ask. This is the Jimmy Kimmel diet. This is like feast and famine. I don't know if you've heard this. It's called alternate day fasting, where you eat a lot one day, and then the next day you don't eat that much. So you eat 2,000 calories one day, and the next day you only eat 5. So it's called feast and famine diet. It's very big. I mean, a lot of people are asking me questions about it. This study just came out from Journal of American Medical Association, shows lots of dropouts really didn't make that much difference. And if you're trying to teach people to eat healthier, you don't really want them doing this feast and famine kind of thing.
Okay, what's the latest?
Oh, wait a second. So that slide is on red and processed meats. And the World Health Organization said red and processed meats are the same as tobacco. Now, I just want to put that in perspective because millions of people die from cigarette smoking, but only 18,000 die from processed meats. But processed meats are barbecued, smoked, or cured meats like bacon or barbecued meats that you can get out in restaurants. And those are really quite dangerous, and they're a risk factor for colon cancer. So there, and also for breast cancer. So that's really interesting. People often ask me about medicines for psychiatry. Do they gain weight? And we find in primary care that patients gain a lot of weight with SSRIs or Seroquel or Abilify or any of these meds. Yes, that's true. The circled medicine there is Wellbutrin, and that's the only antidepressant that is not associated with weight gain. So all of the others are associated with weight gain. I mean, you have to balance your positives minus. I mean, if the Prozac is really making you feel better, then you might have to stay on it. But people do gain weight on these medications. So this is our patient. So see, I don't know if you remember when we started, she was 44 and now she's 50. So we've been working with her six years, okay? So she was 470, she's now 340. So reality, she's not like 200, you know, which is, I mean, I have patients that have done that, but this is reality. So she's still 200 pounds above her ideal weight. So psychiatry saw her and followed her weekly for 2 years, and because she was sexually abused as a child. And she says it's the only thing that got her better. She now has more help. Our social worker got her more help with her son who had special needs, and she's sleeping more. And now she has a job helping special needs parents. We still help her with social issues. So the social issues just don't go away, even though this sounds much better. And she's eventually going to have surgery. And then I'll finish up with this slide. It always makes me laugh because middle-aged sex now is reduced to bathtubs. But on the cartoon there says, did you take it? You know, the Viagra or Cialis, and he says, I can't remember. So that's probably more realistic, but anyhow, if you look at the left, they did a study in Italy with people that had erectile dysfunction, and these guys lost 33 pounds, I think was the average. They didn't have pre-existing diseases like diabetes or hypertension, and in a third of these people, the erectile dysfunction went completely away. And on the right, they did another study, and they gave people nuts and vegetables, no pun intended, and that also had ED. So I'm not saying don't give people the medicines, but you need to talk to them about the obesity piece. And that's something we're going to have to do in the future. So at GW, we're trying to educate future physicians. It's much easier now than it used to be because the young people coming up are really interested in food. I mean, they're interested in nutrition and taking care of their bodies. It's a really new group of people, and we're doing research and trying to, we also now have a cooking school at the medical school. So for 4 weeks every year now, we teach the young people how, we go into the poor areas in Anacostia and teach them how to make healthy food. So we're doing all sorts of things to try to improve the idea that food is medicine. Thank you very much.
Yay. Thank you, Marijane. So first, I just want to say, I'm going to hand this microphone around. This forum gets videotaped, and people who watch the forum can't hear any of the questions unless you ask them through the microphone. But before we hand this around, I just wanted to ask you, what makes you passionate about this subject, this really important subject?
Well, I think I was a doctor, a regular primary care doctor for about 10 years when I first got out of med school, and I just couldn't believe we weren't talking to people about food. You know, I was a nurse too, which I think makes you more practical when you're at the bedside and you see a lot of this stuff. But I went to a conference. I think this is what really stimulated me on diabetes, and I said, what about getting these people more food counseling? This is like 15 years ago. And the doctor said, I never talk, this is a diabetic doctor says, oh, I don't talk to my patients about food, they're never gonna change. So I think that got me all, and how it started was, I said to my boss, who's very innovative, you know, she lets us do whatever we want. I said, just give me 4 hours of working with these patients and let me see if I can just help a group. And then then I was booked up for 6 months. So then they gave me 3 sessions. So now there's 5 physicians, and we're all booked up really for months because we take insurance and we take Medicaid and Medicare. So a lot of these places that work with people with their weight charge $4,000 up front. So it's a whole different thing. But then I got into it. Plus, I'm good at it. No, I mean, I think sometimes how you do things is what you have to know what you're good at, and I can really help these people. But I think it's more that all of us on our team are we're really into it. Like the dietitian is really into it. We're very passionate about all of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Marijane. Let me open it up for questions, and I'm going to ask Steve to hand this microphone around. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. It was absolutely great. I come from Poland, and what I've noticed when
lots of meats there, sausage.
Yeah, yeah, that's true, unfortunately. But what I noticed in the States, in schools, that the food for kids is horrible. In the European Union, it's forbidden to give at school junk food, like, pizzas, hamburgers, and you have here on a daily basis. So with all the knowledge you have, you teach kids bad, eating habits. And for me, it was unbelievable, that this problem will perpetuate if the schools offer only this food. My daughter refuses to eat at all food.
Wow, and this is
food.
in Montgomery County too,
Yeah.
which is
it's
actually won awards for having the healthiest food. I'm
And-
just telling you that.
Yeah, so I was amazed, and so this is one problem. The second is restaurants, kids menu. It's only, you have a really good restaurant, and the kids menu is what? The same
Chicken
market,
nuggets and
chicken
French
nuggets
fries.
and so on. So,
Well, they're starting to change some of this, and I went to a meeting on this, and the reason they're changing some of the children's menu, believe it or not, is not because they care about the kids' health, but because parents are demanding it. So this country is just based on money. I think a lot of what they do and how and if you look even at, for example, kids' menus, they don't want to get rid of less dairy because the dairy people are getting extra money from the frozen foods that go to the schools. It's very complex. It's not, it's not really what you would think. I mean, Bloomberg just wanted to change the soda from this much to this much, and I don't know if you remember how much flack he got. So I think it's coming, the change. I do. I think people are going to start demanding more of it. I can see it with the young people coming up. I think before there really wasn't much question about it.
And I have one more question, sorry. There's a huge discussion in Europe about GMO food. The European Union is very...
Well, that's also complex.
And I just wanted to know
the
what
GMO piece is, I don't think it's really been worked out. To me, I can't believe that it doesn't. The GMO seeds aren't worse than the regular seeds. That's just my intellectual opinion. But if you look at the research, the seeds have not, some of them they actually enrich the seeds with supposedly vitamins. So the GMO people who are actually at a dietary, they actually had a, a booth at one of the ACP, one of our meetings. So they are really trying to get it out there that they're good. But I don't know, there isn't enough research on a lot of this because soil actually has a microbiome. There's so much involved with food. People that pick our vegetables, if they're treated well and paid well, they actually pick healthier fruits and vegetables. So, I mean, it goes on and on. Our microbiome that the soil is in has its own, and if you put certain fertilizers that kill other weeds on it, it actually makes it less likely to grow good food. So there's like what you're saying, there's so many layers on all of this, but I think it's going to come eventually. I've seen a difference in the last 10 years, but I gave a lecture last week up in Rochester, and they were really, I was really surprised. They don't have a weight doctor. They don't, the dietitians don't see a lot of the people, and they're the 6th heaviest urban small area in the United States. So we have a long way to go in this country. This area is actually more aware than a lot of other places, so I don't know.
I have a question while I walk it over there, more on the political side, but maybe you could take it from a science medicine perspective. How steep is the hill to take on the sugar lobby, for example, and bring more of a science-based approach to the public about, the government Strive for 5 and what we should be doing and things like that?
I do know that it matters if we write our congressmen. That's all I can tell you. I'm not much on the political end. I know a lot about it from my patients and also from just because I work in DC and I read, but I really can't comment on how to take on the sugar lobby, so to speak. I just know that it's very strong, and our foods, dairy, et cetera, dairy lobby is very strong too. So they want, and so are the frozen foods. They want to deliver frozen foods to our schools. It's very intertwined. Because Michelle Obama actually tried to take on, I do know this, some of the sodas, and she really had a lot of pushback from, I have a patient that works for the USDA that said that they had trouble, they have to promote the farmers in this country as well. It's all, as I said, very different levels, yeah.
So fruit was on the positive side of the equation, but what about fruit juice?
Fruit juice is bad in general. So the American Academy of Pediatrics says you're only supposed to have 4 ounces of fruit juice a day, and that's probably true. It's not that it's just not good, it's filled with sugar. But fruit, in terms of weight loss, I'm not talking about fruit in general, we only recommend 3 fruits a day. And the best fruits for weight loss are berries. So you can have a cup of berries 3 times a day if you want. And apples and oranges are supposed to be the size of tennis balls, not my head. And the serving of banana is half a banana. So people tend to, like Weight Watchers Points Plus, for example, told people they could eat as much fruit as they wanted, and my patients were eating like 2 bags of grapes a night, not losing weight. You can't, it's still at the end of the day, it's how much calories in. And you have to cut your calories. So I don't know if this is helpful to people, but say your weight is 150 pounds. So to maintain 150 pounds, you take in times 10, which is about 1,500 calories a day. So to lose weight, you have to subtract about 500 from that. So if you're 200 pounds, times 10 is 2,000, you would go to 1,500 calories a day. And that's the number you would put into that MyFitnessPal. And the online calculators that you'll see are way too generous because they say if you take a walk, you can have a ham sandwich or something, and you can't. So you can't include the exercise piece. So that's a very important piece that a lot of the patients don't know because the online calculators are way too generous. I mean, they said, for example, I could have 2,200 calories a day and I would just gain weight.
I was interested in your slide that said things that don't work when you talked about families as food police. Could you just say a little bit about when you have kids and
Well, it's hard
healthy-
because I have a son that loves junk food. So, I mean, I really struggle with this. But I have had to call patients' families and just say, stop. Because say you're obese and, you're 250, 300 pounds. I mean, a lot of my patients are very big. We're not talking, they need to lose even 20 or 30 pounds. They're like 100 pounds overweight. But the families are on them all the time. So every time they have a piece of cake, they're like, don't eat that. And there's some studies that actually show people eat more when you're on their case all the time. So you want to we just tell them to back off. Try to keep healthy foods in the home. Don't buy unhealthy foods. Don't have junk. But don't focus constantly on what they're eating. But as I said, it's a lot easier to give a lecture than it is to actually implement it because there's so much junk food out there and it's so plentiful everywhere. And there's some studies that show if you start eating it at 3 or 4, you're almost addicted to it. Because anybody that knows it's lost weight, once they lose enough weight, you don't really care as much about eating the foods don't appeal to you that are super fattening. They almost taste super processed once you have a healthier diet, but you have to get people on that healthier diet to see that. Okay.
I think we have time for one more question.
Could you say some more about milk and the relationship between milk and things like sleep apnea?
Well, this is we did a study at my clinic. We wanted to see if processed meats, that was really the desire of the study, to see if processed meats actually increased sleep apnea, and we found that a lot of these people did eat these processed meats. So processed meats are really bad. I can't tell you if you read enough. There's a movie called Forks Over Knives. It's worth reading or seeing, and there's a lot of literature on this now that we know that the processed meats, particularly like bacon, are really bad for you. So that's what we found in our study. But we found that people that came in, these are newly diagnosed patients with sleep apnea, that the people that had more dairy tend to present less sick, so to speak, or they had less episodes per hour. And interestingly, with gout, which is now really on the rise, probably due to carbonated sugared sodas, we see so much more gout. I mean, we never used to see that much gout. We're seeing a lot more gout, and we find, and the studies have shown that dairy is actually kind of protective with gout. So people present with less bad gout that have dairy. So is it the calcium? We don't know what particularly, but there's something about, and it's probably more yogurt is probably a lot more healthy than milk, so to speak. But for example, reduced fat milk has been, people that drink a lot of that have an increased rate of Parkinson's. Only a small percentage increase, but with whole milk, there wasn't such a thing. So there's a lot more, there's just so much studies that they need to do with food, but it really, when you tease apart all the studies, even if you're looking at chronic renal failure, the people that eat the most vegetables tend to have the less disease, over and over and over again. You know, it's not, it's pretty factual now, I think. Lots of vegetables. Yes, you can have chicken or fish or poultry or even red meat on occasion. That's okay. But lots of vegetables and fruit seem to be the healthiest diet with your protein. But you have to get your protein for weight loss as well. Okay?
Great.
All right,
Thanks very much, Marianne.
Okay.
I'm sure she'll be around, I'm sure, for a bit. This was a great presentation, and we'll take a break now. Thanks.